There's a recent study that came out that looked at religious practice among Gen Z, which is people born between 1997 and 2012. I'm close to that age range, in case you were wondering. But what was interesting about this study, and as we might expect, just from our just common experience, Gen Z has very low religious practice levels. But what's interesting about this study is the rate of religious practice and affiliation among Gen Z women fell far more dramatically than Gen Z men. And that's interesting because usually, in most generations, women are far more likely to practice religion than men are. You know, women, for whatever reason, are just naturally more receptive to the gospel message. But that's reversed with Gen Z. There's a much higher level of practice among Gen Z men than women, which begs the question, what is going on in our culture today that's specifically harming women more than men? What's causing that? And that's a complicated question, and I'm sure there's a lot of different factors that go into that. But one of the big contributors to that is modern feminism. And there's a good form of feminism, which recognizes and upholds what's good and beautiful about women and what's unique about them, and the dignity that we should treat women with. That's all good. But there's also a toxic form of feminism that's spread through our culture for several generations now. And part of that toxic form of feminism is that it presents the ideal of a woman as someone who is independent and career-oriented and not necessarily focused on the family. That the career is preeminent and more important than the family. And that's replaced the traditional image of the ideal of a woman as the heart of the family. A woman who is a wife and a mother, as the heart of the family. And the shift is so deep that one of the effects of that is a significant majority of Americans now support abortion, because they view abortion as something that frees a woman from the bonds and responsibilities of motherhood and enables her to make her own choice as to how she wants to live, whether she wants to be a mother or she wants to follow a career or some other goals in life. But here's the problem with that image of femininity. We have to look at what it means to truly be human and what leads us to flourish. And one of the great contributions of Pope John Paul II, and he had many contributions, but he expanded on what it means to be created in the image and likeness of God. And he really expanded the focus of the church's theology on that concept. And one of the things that he said, and this was from a general audience in 1979, he said that part of what it means to be in the image and likeness of God is that we are made for communion with others. At the very heart of what it means to be human and to be in the image and likeness of God is that we are made for relationships of love. And the family life forms the environment in which we first learn and experience what relationships of love are. The most important relationship that children see growing up is the relationship between their mother and father. And family life, where we learn to bear with one another and to be kind and forgiving to one another, that's where we find happiness, and that's meant to lead us to the church, where we experience communion with each other and ultimately communion with God. Because each one of us is ultimately created to be incorporated into the life of the Trinity, which is a community of three persons. And so that's what we're created for. In reality, family life isn't perfect. None of our families are perfect. We all have our own struggles. But it's in persevering in those and growing in virtue and elevating family life that we grow and we learn what's necessary and what we need to do to create stronger relationships. So if that's what we're created for, if we're created for communion with others and ultimately communion with God, what happens to women when they're told that family life is secondary and you need to focus on a career, that's more important? Well, that's not true. You're not going to find happiness and fulfillment in a career at the expense of the family. Or when women are told that they don't need God and they don't need the church, that they can be independent and find happiness there. Well, we do need God. We do need the church because we're created for those relationships. And if women are told that they can even end the life of a child that God has given to them as a gift of love, how much harm does that do when someone who's created to nurture and to cherish that relationship makes a choice to end it? And so these ideas of modern feminism, the toxic element of it, they attack the very foundation of what it means to be human. And so we shouldn't be surprised if we see damage coming about because of that. Adam and Eve stepped out from God's authority in the Garden of Eden. They made a choice to be independent from God and to sin against him. And look at the results that happened because of what they did. We cannot step even further away from God and expect good things to happen. Good things are going to happen when we step back under God's authority and we rediscover and seek healing in the very relationships that are meant to be our joy and our happiness. And so what are some practical things that we can learn from this? Well, we all have responsibilities. For men, never use a woman for selfish pleasure. If a man truly loves a woman, he will not subject her to pregnancy outside of marriage. Chastity protects authentic love. And so as men, we need to subject our desires to what's authentically good for the people that we love and care about. So to be a true man and to grow in virtue means to exercise the virtue of chastity. And for young women, to recognize that Eve didn't find happiness when she stepped away from God. That was not a source of happiness. She found misery. The desires of your heart will be fulfilled in relationships of communion with others, in your family, in the church. And if God's calling you to marriage, in your relationship as a wife and as a mother. This Sunday, today, is Respect Life Sunday, and it's also an election year. And the U.S. bishops remind us that abortion is the preeminent moral issue of our time. We recently saw the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, which led to terrible destruction, and over 200 people have been killed by that hurricane in the United States, and that is a tragedy. And our hearts go out to the victims of that hurricane, and we pray for those who are impacted. But to put it in perspective, over 10 times that number of people lose their lives through abortion every day in this country. And we don't see those images on the TV screen, and we don't hear those stories in the media, but they are real nevertheless. And so that should teach us just how important of a moral issue this is and why the bishops emphasize it so much. And so in an election year, our bishops remind us we do have a moral obligation to vote and to shape society according to what's authentically good. And we are to vote for candidates, especially looking at the preeminent moral issue of our time, to vote for candidates that will support the sanctity of life. Leaders that will teach people about the value of motherhood and the importance of the family, and who will work to build up and support family life. Those who will support women who are in difficult situations, and candidates that are going to work with pro-life leaders and support the pro-life cause to advance the message of the sacredness of life. We should vote against candidates that want to codify Roe versus Wade as a national law. We need to vote against that. Or people who are advocating abortion. Or there are even political leaders who are persecuting pregnancy centers. and intimidating them and bringing lawsuits against them that are frivolous in order to undermine the work that pregnancy centers are doing to support women who are in difficult situations. There's often not a perfect candidate to vote for in different races, but candidates that support the sanctity of life are going to do much more good for society than the damage that's done by politicians who are supporting, or in some cases even celebrating, abortion. And so as we reflect upon today's readings and we see God's plan for humanity, he says it's not good for man to be alone. We are created for relationships with others. And so that should form our view of the importance of family life and the sanctity of marriage and the respect for the sanctity of all life.